Hey, Paul's rant time again. This one's about the patriarchy. Is the patriarchy as bad as some claim? After all, didn't they give women their rights? Well, at least in countries that women have rights, which isn't every country, but we'll get into that a bit in a minute. The reason I'm looking into this topic is the younger women in my life quite often complain about the patriarchy, how it's holding women back and not giving them equality and all that sort of stuff, or equality of outcome, however you want to look at it. And just for the record, I'm not against women's rights at all. Just sick of the complaints about the patriarchy. Anyway, let's explore. So naturally, I turned to AI to get a bit of background on this and asked it about the history of the patriarchy, recent women's rights in Western society, and the lack thereof in other societies. The response I got was there have been overwhelmingly patriarchy societies for the last 5,000 years. And why is that? Because men and women are different. Men have greater upper body strength, or I'd say strength in general, and are obviously more aggressive, which leads to wars and fights and not always good stuff, obviously. Whereas until recently, females have reproductive constraints, which are becoming somewhat less in the modern era, but certainly in times gone by. And when did equal legal status happen? Such as voting, education, employment, etc. Well, that arrived in Western democracies between about 1918 and the 1970s. Apparently this was due to activism by proponents of women's rights, industrialisation, and the world wars. And apparently also through Enlightenment-derived individualism, which is a view of the human being as a self-directing, independent entity who possesses natural rights. In summary, from AI, the political rights for women were extended by pre-existing male power structures in the West within the last century, and Muslim societies are much slower at adopting this. So here's me thinking, well, AI, the one I used was Grok, agrees with me. Let's continue. So the next question. So when women call for the dismantling of the patriarchy, is that ironic if the patriarchy gave them the rights they have? Well, Grok didn't agree with that. It's not ironic. It's logical progression. There you go. And then Grok went on about rights being won, not granted. The patriarchy had denied rights for thousands of years, so perpetuated inequality. And dismantling the patriarchy builds on incomplete victories of the past. And mentioned something about the gender pay gap. Now I thought, well, that doesn't flow, so I replied, the gender pay gap has been debunked. Voting rights were initially for men because they could be conscripted to war, or landowners because they had a stake in what happens. And women in Muslim societies aren't allowed to protest. So Grok had to admit defeat about the gender pay gap, stating when adjusted for factors like occupation, hours worked, education, experience and career choices, the gap narrows significantly. Well, I would have thought that would come out in the first round of discussions with Grok, but apparently I had to get a clarification on that. And yeah, property and military links justified male-only suffrage initially. And in non-progressive Muslim societies, women-led protests face brutal crackdowns. So I thought I'd try again, following along this line of thinking. Maybe Grok will agree with me. So my next question was, so then, do men grant women their rights? The reply in short was, institutionally, yes. Male power structures legally codified women's rights. Practically and morally, no. Women fought, suffered, and forced the change. The grant narrative downplays the struggle and agency involved. Rights are now defended and expanded by both sexes in democratic systems, no longer purely granted by one group. It's the no longer purely granted that I take as a win. So yes, women's rights were granted by men, but are no longer granted. As mentioned, I'm not against equal rights. I don't want to take away women's rights. I have no problem working for females. I've had the same female CEO for the last 20 years before I semi-retired. And she was great. She was fantastic at her job. And as I was working in aged care, most of the management team were females, and most of them were very good. And we're all equal before God. But maybe stop giving the patriarchy a bad rap. After all, in my opinion, they did give women their rights. And what do you expect them to do? It's not easy for men to rise up the patriarchy, so I wouldn't expect it to be easy for women either. And maybe they have years of inequality to get over, but it's a dog-eat-dog business world, so you just got to do your best and hope for the best. And I really don't see why women want to climb the corporate ladder per se, but kudos to those that do. But I'm a more traditional, conservative type of guy, so yeah, we'll leave it at that. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you in the next one.